Is it going?
At this point.
Yeah.
See, I went live, so okay. Come on in, sign in if you could. Grab a snack, and we're gonna get started. Ready? 6 o'clock? All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So I am Dr. Nicholas Nicoletti. I am the Director of First Year Experience, and I have the pleasure of overseeing our first year seminar, our search course. And this semester, our theme, we choose a theme each semester, is storytelling and climate change. And we chose the common book, 1001 Voices on Climate Change by Devi Lockwood. And all of our courses are reading this text, and it's basically about a young woman who traveled around the world, soliciting stories about climate change and really getting sort of the human face of how climate change has impacted people internationally. In our first event, we were super happy and excited to bring Devi here for our keynote. And this is the follow-up event to that. And this is one of the first student-led panels that we've had for the search program. And I am really excited in a second to introduce these 5 fantastic students who you see up here. They have written the questions for this panel. They have organized this panel. And so this is student-led from the ground up. They're even going to ask the questions and have the discussion. After that, we're going to take some questions from you all. So as you're listening, please have your questions ready. And we're live streaming this on YouTube Live. And so we'll actually have hopefully some questions from the program and the people who are watching it. So I'm really excited about that. So I'm going to introduce our student panel. So first, and this is in order of the table, we have Charlotte Baumgard. She's a freshman literature major who plans to graduate in 2027. She's a part of the Alvernia Theater Club, and upon graduation, she plans on becoming a high school English teacher while simultaneously publishing and sharing her critical and creative writing with the world. She views climate change as one of the most pressing issues facing the modern world and is honored to be presented with the experience of discussing it with fellow students that also care about the fate of our climate. Then we have Cambry Colwell. She is a freshman occupational therapy major. Her major goal after graduation is to help people, specifically as an occupational therapist. She has joined our panel today because she believes that climate change needs to be openly talked about more and that we must take accountability for how we have gotten to where we are in terms of the climate change crisis today. Next, we have Allison Berger. She is a senior social work and criminal justice dual degree student with a minor in gerontology. She is set to graduate in May of 2024. On campus, she is an academic tutor with the ASC, an alternative break leader, a resident assistant, vice president of Phi Alpha National Honor Society, Criminal Justice Association treasurer and secretary, and Friends of Animals secretary. After graduation, she plans on attending graduate school for her master's in social work with a focus on political and macro social work. She hopes to work for one of the military branches as a social worker, providing soldiers with the resources given by the VA and advocating for increases in the benefits for veterans within the United States, while also providing mental health counseling to active duty soldiers. One reason she wanted to be on the panel was because this is a prominent topic in the world, and also as a social worker, this issue impacts her clients' lives in having access to the resources and various other aspects. Next, we have Sharin Smith. Sharin is a junior communications major and has a minor in art literature and digital media marketing. She is the president of the Wolfpack Media Communications Club and plays on the women's lacrosse team. Once she graduates in 2025, Sharin intends to return home to Maryland and find a social media management position in Washington, D.C. Her reason for being here today is because she believes climate change is an important discussion to have as issues worsen around the world. And finally, Bailey Bodine. She's currently completing her third year of 5 in the Master of Athletic Training program, and she'll be graduating in 2026. She is involved on campus in many ways by being a peer minister in residence in the Mission and Ministry Office, a peer mentor, and volunteering on and off campus in various ways. Her plans after graduation are currently unknown, but she's exploring her opportunities within the field. She expressed her interest in the panel for being a voice for students and others on climate change. So welcome our panel for today. I am now going to leave it to them.
Everyone, welcome to the panel. We're going to start off this evening's question with, is it too late to stop climate change? And I'm going to kick it off by answering first. Personally, I think it is not too late, not yet at least. I think because of our generation and those that have come before us, the awareness that we have now and how we realize that climate change is affecting our communities and our world. I think it's possible that we can implement change and, put laws into effect and start changing different habits of ours to help combat the worsening conditions of our economy, of our climate.
To add to that, I would like to say that we had a guest speaker come into Watt's class. I think it was Dr. Schrober, and he was telling us about how climate change was going to happen no matter what, yet we sped it up, and no one's ready to take accountability for that action. And I think that our generation should be the ones to do that.
Okay, all right. There it is. I really appreciate what you guys are saying. It kind of reminds me of a story that we used for a mission moment. It was a boy on the beach, and there were several starfish that got washed up with the tide. And this little boy keeps throwing one starfish back in the ocean after another. And this man comes along saying, why are you doing that? It's just one starfish. But the boy said, it's just one starfish. It makes a difference to that one starfish. So being able to make that small difference and small impact really, really will affect down the road what climate change will look like, I think, in my opinion.
Adding to that, I think that a lot of us, we view climate change as this really vast issue that we often feel a little bit scared of because we don't know how us as our small self can actually make an impact. But I feel like if we do take those small steps, even if they are very tiny, to make a difference, if we all do that together, it definitely will make a more big difference than we were expecting.
The second question that we have is, how does climate change the future of our profession or the future of employment generally? So with being a social worker, it does impact housing for individuals, and they would have to relocate depending on the resources are being scarce. Likewise with policies and how the individuals live, and also being a criminal justice, fighting for these resources, because without people will have to relocate, and that comes into different jobs that may be difficult to find, including farming. If there is drought, those type of resources might not be available for some of the families.
Okay. Personally, as a communications major, I think that the coverage of climate change is going to be more prominent in the future. Right now, I intern at a PR firm, and one of the clients that I work with actually is focused on agriculture. So one thing that I have learned through this client is seeing how different ways, like as far as the weather is, affects different crops that these farmers aren't able to grow, which affects them and their ability to produce things that we need to survive, like essentially food in a way. And one issue that they're trying to push right now is the farm bill that has been pending for the past couple of months. It is currently expired. And for those of you that don't know what the farm bill is, it's a policy that addresses farm-related subsidies and issues every 5 years. And because Congress has been unable to pass this, a lot of family farms are struggling right now with trying to make do with what they have. So going back to me being in communications, so I think having more news coverage and bringing more awareness to this issue, that's how climate change affects me.
I really enjoyed that you, Sharon, brought up agriculture because that's a huge staple of who we are as human beings because we need the nutrients, especially from looking at an athletic training position of nutrients having genetically modified organisms like food and looking at what's organic versus not organic and what's the difference and having that general knowledge of what is different about this apple versus this apple, and how knowing that science behind it. But it will also affect my patients that I work with. Smog being a big thing, especially over in China. If I go internationally to be with a team because of, I don't know, the Olympics, it will determine how our patients and our athletes adapt to that environment. It will determine how treatments are done and what steps leading up to traveling will be done as well. So it impacts a lot of the treatment behind the medical perspective.
I guess I'll add one more thing before we move on to the next question. One thing that I saw this summer in the news was how a lot of people that worked outside, they were like extremely affected by climate change because of the heat, especially down south where the temperatures got up into like the hundreds and higher. They actually, a news article that I read from the New York Times, I believe, talked about how we could see these future professions start to decrease because of this, especially for those people that, you know, this is the only job that they're able to have, specifically immigrant families who are like, you know, they're concerned about their legal status in the country. Like these are just easy jobs that they can get. So with like having the weather impact them that way, it can definitely cause issues within these groups and these families. The next question that we're going to ask is, has the impending threat of climate change affected your perception of your own future? If so, how? I'm gonna say yes, because it makes me nervous about whether or not we're gonna be here. I know a lot of scientists, I'm not a scientist, but I've heard a lot of reports saying that we are, you know, we're slowly, not slowly, but rapidly destroying our world, and we're starting to suffer the consequences of it. So it does make me nervous to see where we're going to be. It makes me nervous about this upcoming generation and where they're going to stand and how they can possibly clean up the mess that we've created.
Just like she said, like it makes me worried about like where we're gonna be. Like, are we gonna make it to graduation? Are we gonna be able to have kids and raise them in a healthy world? And as well as like one thing that was really eye-opening to me was over the summer, well, at the end of my senior year, when we went on our senior trip, we couldn't go to one of our stops because of the Canadian wildfires. And that was really eye-opening because you wouldn't expect to be like, especially from where I'm from, like you just don't expect, oh, climate change isn't a thing, like it's not real. And then that happened, and then we're all like, oh, okay, this is a thing and it is happening. And it was just really eye-opening.
I definitely agree. I think it's very, very scary. When I was a little kid, one of my biggest dreams was to have a kid of my own. I work with kids right now. They're my favorite. They're awesome. I think kids are awesome. They're literally the future of our world. But now that climate change has posed such a serious threat to our world, I seriously do question whether it's worth bringing a child into a world that might just be wrought with these issues in our climate and these issues that a lot of people don't really want to solve. So, yeah.
Really quickly tie back into what you said about like the wildfires. It got me thinking about the wildfires took place this summer, actually, like in New York and mostly the northeastern region. I'm not from the north, I'm from Maryland, but we did have some of the wildfire smoke come down to DC, and it was hard to breathe down there. Like a lot of people, if you walk downtown, we had to wear masks, and just being in that type of environment, it made you realize like, wow, this is like literally happening right now. And this could become the future where we do end up walking around with masks. And it's kind of like an outside pandemic almost, if you think about it, because we were wearing masks indoors, now we have to wear them outdoors because of the air quality.
I agree also with the wildfires. We graduated during the wildfires. Our school insisted that we had our graduation outside during when the smog was really, really bad. So that was very eye-opening to see how people were literally having struggles breathing, like while we were waiting to graduate, while we were waiting to walk the stage. And we had to have a lot of people sit inside to watch our graduation because they had breathing problems. My grandfather couldn't see my graduation in person. He had to sit in our school auditorium and watch the live stream of it instead of being there in person, which was pretty unfortunate and is definitely very eye-opening to how serious these issues of climate change are becoming, even in our communities where we usually haven't been affected by it seriously in the past.
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for everyone kind of sharing their story on this panel. But as we kind of shift to our next question, what was your overall impression of the Devi Lockwood book, 1001 Voices on Climate Change? To kick it off, I really enjoyed how Devi approached this book in being able to tell individual stories, because everybody's story is so different and so vast. And being able to see different backgrounds and how different people live just within sitting here in Berks County in a classroom. It gave us a little bit of a chance to explore the world around us and not just sit in our own little bubble here in our classroom. So that was one of the big overall things that I really enjoyed, was she approached it with a story perspective.
I do agree. It was a very eye-opening book, but for me, I didn't like how much personal bias she threw into the book. As like a reader, I feel like we should have been able to connect, or as a reader, I feel as though I would have been able to make a deeper connection with the people's stories if there was less bias in it. Then again, it was a very eye-opening book, and I really liked the way how she wrote it and how she gave us those viewpoints that a lot of us haven't seen, like you said. So yeah. Going off of that, being able to see it in a story perspective rather than just having statistics. I mean, we're all college students, like no one just wants to read facts. We want to read stories. So I kind of like that approach, while also making it not forceful. She didn't force us to be able to believe that climate change is real, but kind of made us realize that it could be in these places that we might have never heard of before, but they are struggling, rather than we're so fortunate to have what we have while others like are drastically impacted by this.
What I enjoyed about the book was that it was very upfront and personal. I think like coming from a communication standpoint, it wasn't like a typical news story, or it wasn't like a story that you are constantly going to hear about. These were untold stories from people who you may not even see in the news, you may not even know about. So I appreciate the rawness of her storytelling.
I also really enjoyed the storytelling aspect of her book. I think that, again, what she was saying about how it's not this normal news story that you usually hear. I heard from a lot of journalists when I went to the Washington Journalism and Media Conference a few years ago over the summer. And a lot of those journalists, they were usually older white men. So they sort of had this very strict vision of what journalism is and what journalism should be. And they usually said that journalism is very much just facts, it's very straightforward. So I really appreciate that Debbie takes a more emotional approach to it, because I feel like emotions sometimes they can teach us a lot more than just facts can.
Okay, our next question is, which story or interview from the book resonated you with the most and why? So I'm gonna start this off, and personally, the one that like opened my eyes the most was it was somewhere in Africa. And they had to boil water to have clean water, and the child tipped over the pot and it spilled over him, and the boiling water would go on to kill this child. And that was just really eye-opening, like the fact that I can just go to a faucet, get some water and drink it, but there's people in Africa literally dying because they don't have access to clean water. They're trying to make clean water, and it's just like, it's scary.
The book that I really enjoyed was during the time when she was no longer flying on planes because of the carbon emissions, and she started going on cargo ships. And I think it was really interesting when she was pretty much the only woman on these cargo ships, and she was just experiencing this sort of innate fear being surrounded by all these men that she was really unfamiliar with. And I think that's just a really interesting thing to point out, because even as she's like navigating the globe and getting these stories on climate change, she's still affected by the fact that she is a woman. And I think that's an important thing to take into account of when reading this book, because it's going to look a lot different. Her experiences throughout the world as she's researching climate change are going to look a lot different because she is a woman, as opposed to how they would look if she were a man.
Okay, our next question is, given some of our panelists over here are peer mentors and are reading the Devi Lockwood book, 1001 Voices on Climate Change, what are some specific things that your search classes have taken away from the readings, or something your instructor has done in class? I know I'm in Watt's class and I know I'm not a peer mentor, but Watts really likes to dig deep in everything. And he's really like opened my eyes to the fact that it's more than a book. These are real people's stories, and he's made us go in and go in deep, go in knee deep, you might say, to into these stories, like that child from Africa I was talking about, or when we spent a long time on just like the first opening of the book, just analyzing, and I'm not used to that, but I'm happy we did that.
I would say my class, I'm a peer mentor for Professor Hayes' class. We kind of do the same thing almost. He likes to break the students up into different groups and analyze different stories or a chapter from the book. And it gets the students thinking about like enduring and critical questions, which is something that I'm proud of, because something I've learned in my freshman year. Thank you, Dr. Schultz. But I'm glad to see that the students, they are asking these questions. They are recognizing that, you know, it's not just an issue that takes place in our own communities or in our own countries, like it's worldwide. And I appreciate that they have the opportunity to like analyze these things, because I know in other places or in other schools, they might not have the opportunity to do so.
I know in our section with Dr. Thacker, we took a whole different approach to the book. So we have a class of primarily DPT, forensic science, and nursing majors. So we went at it from a different angle of how can we connect it to something bigger than we are. So we were looking throughout the book at different chapters. The students were broken up, and they related it back to Healthy People 2030, which is a national organization that has different specific health goals, whether it be environmental, whether it be for a specific population. And we really focused on it being something bigger than ourselves and being bigger than who we are as individuals and what a community is. And I really think that's something, as we were looking through a scientific lens, we were looking at a lot of places don't have healthcare, or they don't have the proper healthcare that we think in America. It's unconventional healthcare. I remember there was a story one of my students was reviewing from the book. It was they had more of a holistic twist to medicine, and that's all the medicine they've ever known. So to bring in that different type of healthcare may switch that type of cultural aspect to it, but it also may help them by bringing a modern healthcare into those places.
Coming from Professor Daughton's class, who is just a biology professor, we kind of went into depth about what it means for our own body, while also reflecting back when Debbie Lockwood did come, and having a whole entire class period dedicated to that, talking about what others thought about her speech, what they would have wanted to get out of it if they didn't get something out of it. But then also talking about different topics within their own lives of being first-time college students, while also being from nursing to OT to communications, AT.
Professor Rothstein's section, we sort of focused on our own privilege in relation to climate change and how we can read these stories about countries and places who are deeply affected by climate change, but we can't really understand it as severely as they do because we're not directly impacted by it. Like, we can just drink our water that's right here. We don't have to go out and walk for water. Towards the beginning of the semester, we did an activity where we went outside on the track for a day and we walked around the track a few times without water, and we carried like little weights so we could sort of simulate the labor that people have to go through in order to get things that we can just walk up to a faucet and drink for ourselves. And then our next question is, why do you think some people don't believe in climate change despite the obvious effects currently taking place? So there's definitely a lot of people who don't believe in climate change at all. When I was in 5th grade, I had a guidance counselor, I believe it was, who was very against climate change. Every day we would come into class and he would be like, the polar ice caps aren't melting. This climate change stuff is getting out of control. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is happening. And he was very adamant on that fact. But I think it's just that a lot of people are very set in their beliefs and they don't really want to believe anything else, even if the facts that these things are happening are presented to them. They don't really want to believe it because they want to believe that everything is fine and they want to believe that they are safe. And obviously climate change is a very, very scary thing. So I think a lot of it is wanting to believe that we're safe and wanting to believe that we're okay and nothing bad is happening to our climate or to our world.
To add to that, I also think a big part of it is people don't want to take accountability for their actions. You see people around campus, they're throwing stuff on the ground and they don't think twice about picking it up. And then that is like part of the problem. Another thing is, like, I grew up in a really small town, really rural area, so we never really saw climate change from the actual lens. And a lot of people, even me, till I really came to college, I'm like, oh, climate change is like, it's happening, but it's not happening that fast. Like, we're fine. And just reading Davy's book, actually, I'm like, holy crap, like, this is happening. Especially in Tuvalu, where the island is like literally drowning. And another thing that relates to that, I feel like in Tuvalu, is you have the older people, they're like, I'm staying here no matter what. God's gonna save me, and whatever happens will happen. And then you have the younger generation who's just fleeing, who's not trying to save Tuvalu. They're just like, okay, I'm gonna go save myself. So I think that's another way to look at it.
Going off your generation point there, I think with accountability, I think like the older generation might no longer think it's their responsibility, like they're just tossing it down to us, which is, I mean, to each his own. But I think that we all contributed to some part of climate change, and everybody needs to take accountability for it. I also think that personally, I find it strange that some people don't believe in climate change or recognize that it's real, especially when you're able to walk outside on an October day like today in the 70 degrees. That makes no sense. But I think like if that's your belief, if it's because like a religious or like a political background, whatever, I mean, that's fine. But I think at the end of the day, we do have to come to our senses and realize that, we never know when the world could supposedly end, or like how are these issues going to become more and more worse over time.
Okay. Our next question is, has the idea of climate change been turned into an industry that has fueled extremists to profit from people's fear of this very real problem? My answer to this would be yes, absolutely. Because go to the grocery store 15 years ago, you never saw the go green, use this instead of that, use this that can be refilled. But behind all that, those companies are the problem. They're the ones that are also producing all the smog and putting stuff into our rivers, and they don't want to take, once again, accountability for that. Or you have the people who are on TikTok and they're like, oh, the world's gonna end. You have to go vegan. You have to use this. You have to use bamboo toothbrushes. Don't use anything that comes in plastic. So then you have your like extremists, and like nobody knows where to lie because they're like, okay, so we switched to all this, but what do we do with all this plastic that we still have that are still on the shelves in grocery stores? What do we do with all of this when all those corporations would shut down? How are we going to get the needs that we have? So, yeah.
Like the social media aspect of it, I think there's definitely a lot of fear mongering that comes with climate change. I feel like a lot of people, they aren't really well informed on climate change, but they still want to make videos and they still want to get traction because if they say like, oh, our planet's going to like it's going to explode or it's going to die or something very, very extreme, very nonsensical. If they say that, they're going to get a lot of traction on their video. They're going to get a lot of attention to themselves. So I think it's a lot of fear mongering in that sense. All right. And then our next question is, how can we combat the sense of apathy that often surrounds the issue of climate change? So I think that climate change is such a huge issue that we often can feel sort of helpless in the face of it. We sort of feel like we don't know what we can do again as our small selves, as one person. We don't know what we can do to combat this huge issue that is truly affecting the whole world. But I feel like we have to take the small steps and recognize that small steps can lead to bigger steps. And I think something really important that we can all do is vote. Today is election day. I voted earlier. I hope other people did as well. I voted in my local election. Climate change nowadays is pretty much on every ballot because it's such a serious issue now. People really do care about it. And voting is something that you can do to ensure that those issues are addressed on a larger level than you can address them personally.
I totally agree with you. I think one big thing is education. Education for any topic, especially climate change, because things are changing so rapidly and there's so much information being bombarded at social media and being bombarded in the news. I think education, especially for our older generations, as well as our younger generations, to be able to understand what is the most current information, what is the most accurate information for me to be able to make the most difference about.
Our next question that we have is, how do you personally contribute to sustainability on campus in your daily life, such as in your housing, transportation, or consumption habits? So for me personally, I try to not drive my car unless I have to. That is hard though when I have field work and I have to drive. But I try either like on the weekends not to try to go out to the grocery store or other places. Um, Try to do in one big bulk so I'm not wasting gas. Putting that also into that atmosphere is a really big thing for me.
To what you said about driving, I know when my roommates or my friends and I like to go out, we normally carpool. Mostly one reason we get good parking spots, somebody wants to move their car, but it's also to help eliminate the amount of emission that goes into the atmosphere. Another way that I kind of contribute to sustainability would be I like to use reusable bags. Something that I started doing when once I got back on campus this year. I wasn't big on it at first because honestly, it's like I'm going to spend $5 on a bag. I might as well go grocery shopping a lot. But now that I do, I try to use that. If I have to use like plastic bags, I will. But I noticed that using reusable bags is helpful. So.
I'm a commuter, so I do have to drive to school every day, but I have grown up in a very eco-conscious family. My mom, she only uses reusable bags when she goes to the grocery store, and whenever we do get disposable bags, we reuse them. So we truly never throw them away. And we also have a garden, so that sort of reduces our waste. We get most of our fruits and our vegetables from our garden, and we compost the waste that we have from those fruits and vegetables. So it's more eco-friendly, and we're not wasting as much food as we could be.
So going off of that, what are potential research projects that could be done to help reduce climate change? This was one thing that our students looked at in Dr. Thacker's section. We were looking at various ways to reduce water, as well as various ways to just be more cautious of what we're doing with the resources we have and are using on a daily basis.
Okay, so we have one last question for the panel, and then I am going to try and turn that mic on and use it to take audience questions. So hopefully you have some audience questions ready. So be thinking about those right now. But the last question for the panel, and everybody we can just go right down the line, is do you think that your generation will step up to the climate change challenge? What do you think?
Personally, absolutely do believe that we will. I think that the fact that we're just having this sort of conversation now says a lot. And I think that, especially growing up in the digital age where we can get access to almost any information that we want to as quickly as we want to, we are definitely very well informed on a lot of issues. Like I've heard a lot of people on campus talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict in the past few weeks. And I feel like if we didn't have social media, we wouldn't be able to learn about those issues like we have. And I feel like we're a very driven generation. So I feel like we'll definitely use that knowledge and use it to make a true difference in the face of climate change.
In Dr. Watts's class, I am known as the class skeptic when it comes to this question. Because when he first asked me, I said, absolutely not. I don't think our generation will ever step up to the challenge because they'd have to get their faces out of their phones. Now after participating in, I think we're in what, week 12, as a freshman in my search class, it's brought me some hope about this. Just to see how well I have been informed in this past 12 weeks just about climate change. If we just keep informing like the younger generations, I think we could be in good condition. It's just getting us to do that, I guess.
Kind of going off of that, I think that some people will step up to the challenge, some won't. We're always going to have two parties that one may not want to do something and one may want to do it. So I do think that there are going to be some individuals that will want to, but it also depends on like how much of their work ethic they want to put into the job of promoting and educating those in the world.
I think that our generation will step up to the challenge. I think we step up to other challenges that we face, such as like traditional norms amongst different generations, and also like the social injustice issues, primarily like the year 2020. So I think this is nothing new to us in a sense. I think we are capable of like stepping up to this and facing it head on. But like my fellow panelists said, it's just a matter of us willing to do that.
Echo everything my fellow panelists have said. I really do think we, as a generation, can step up to the plate. I think that we have started just by sitting here tonight and having this open conversation and having this safe space to have this open dialogue is half the battle, I think, in this day and age, because we are so into our technology that it is hard to be able to have a face-to-face conversation with people and having those social skills to be able to have these types of hard, enduring question conversations with the world.
Thank you, panelists. Give the panelists a round of applause. Awesome. So now I've got the mic. I'd like to come around and take some questions from y'all. So raise your hand up, and I'll come over and you can ask a question. Don't be shy. And if not, I have reserved questions. Yeah. I'm coming, Ethan.
Yeah, so the other day I was like watching like this older movie, right? And one of the scenes that were in it was like a newspaper that said like something about climate change, and that just like really caught my eye because like me personally, like I've never like before I came to Alvernia, like at my other college, they never like talked about it. I went to like Harrisburg Area Community College, and it just wasn't really, you know, like a well-known topic. But you know, coming here like just really opened my eyes just on like different stuff regarding that. And yeah, so I just thought that was like interesting, and how everyone back then, like it was like the mid 1900s, and everyone back then like just didn't like they just took it for a joke, you know what I mean? And we find that a lot of people today still take it for a joke. Obviously not as many, but what do you think will be like the tipping point, like to like make everybody make their like the gears shift a little bit and like just really open their eyes? Like what do you think is going to have to happen? You know what I'm saying? That's my question.
I think, like you said, there's always going to be your skeptics. But I know, like personally, I have already tilted my gears, as you'd say, because of those wildfires. But I think it will sadly take a major event for our eyes to finally open and to be like, okay, get those older generations to be in on it, as you might say, because they don't want to take accountability for what has happened because of them.
I personally think that we already are in a tipping point almost. I mean, this past summer was a great prime example of all the effects of climate change. But I mean, if they need something like Wally to happen for them to realize that, then I guess. But um, yeah, I think this like we're currently facing the tipping point right now.
Uh, this is not a question. This is like more of like my personal opinion, but I just want to hear your thoughts on it because I truly think that you cannot stop climate change because it's in the inevitable, but you could try to slow it down and take steps to slow it down. So that's where I disagree with you, panelists, on trying to stop something that is just designed. It's really like it's beyond our human comprehension to really understand why our planet is radically deteriorating. But we could try to understand at a certain rate and try to really slow it down as much as possible. But at the end of the day, we're all going to vanish at some point. We're all going to go. So
I hear what you're saying. I personally like to some degree, I do agree with you. However, I think we do have, or like, there are some things that are currently taking place that are trying to figure out ways to slow down climate change. It just hasn't been put into effect yet. So there's a lot of things that stand still that just need a, need a jump start to go ahead and take place.
So the one question I have is, what do you think Alvernia can do to help improve global warming or like reduce it? Because I've seen a lot of more trash cans and recyclables around, and I see me going on the turf field at random times. I see more trash. So like, what do you think we should do to help like streamline the process?
Great question. That was also going to be my question. So you've got it. So what can we do around campus I like it. Good job.
Thing that I saw around campus that's been implemented, I think, a couple years ago, was the reusable water filters. Cutting down on plastic water bottles. I mean, like, there's always gonna be plastic water bottles, but having that reusable water bottle and using those stations, while they can be a pain sometimes, that can also cut down on plastic, which then also helps the environment and also helps with global warming and climate change.
Other responses to that, panelists? Other things we can do? More recycling bins. I like the water filters. That's a good idea. That's already there.
I think the recycling bins will, like, I'm kind of aware what's taking place right now with like as far as the trash and everything. I noticed that there are like only what 2-3 dumpsters on campus, and the recycling dumpster is like near the commuter parking lot. So a lot of people that would like to recycle opt not to just because they don't feel like walking that far. Like for instance, I live in Ellerman. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't feel like walking all the way to the commuter lot to toss recycling stuff out. But I know last year when we didn't have the dumpsters, we had like this individual trash sections on campus, and a lot of people were recycling then. So I think if we were to bring that back, that could possibly help.
I know I'm the worst at this, but walking down to the Plex instead of taking the shuttle, it's just those little habit changes that we can try to implement, whether it be throwing your can in the recycling bin versus the trash can, taking a walk down to the Plex versus a shuttle. Obviously, I know it's hard when we have college town and things, but carpooling and doing little things that will make an impact later.
Yeah. So thank you all. This is such a pleasure to listen to all of you and see so many people interested in our future and students. So I wanted to say one thing. I want to. This is maybe a little bit beyond or before your time, but yeah, there are natural ebbs and flows with our climate, right? But there are things that we have exponentially kind of increased with our own sort of activities as human beings. And if you remember the ozone layer, right, and the sort of the hole in the ozone, well, we actually repaired that Right? So I want to sort of give hope that there are ways that we can repair the things that we have done. And so maybe we can't sort of stop the fact that we're going to experience heat death in so many billion years. But the exponential growth of climate change and global warming is something that we can repair, especially when we're the ones who broke it, right? But my question actually is a little harder than that. So I like what Sharon said, that we are already in the middle. We've already experienced those events, right? And I think that, but all of you, many of you talked about how the book with Devi Lockwood was so eye-opening, because in other parts of the world, those events have been cataclysmic, right? And there have been thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who have died from hurricanes and from tsunamis, and there are already these events. So my question has to do with the fact that what can we do so it seems to be a human nature to be concerned about things that affect us. And that's when we start to make that tipping point is always then. But we also know that we live in one of the most secure and privileged countries in the world, and that we won't experience the effects of climate change to the same degree as other people in other parts of the world. And so it seems to be that if those events are already happening, that part of the problem is we have to figure out how to solve that problem. It's a human problem, a human nature problem, right? How do we get people to care about things that don't happen to them?
I think we get people to care by non-biased news. Not the extreme, like, oh my God, there's this, and this is happening in China. Just like genuine raw coverage of what's happening in other countries. Like, I would have never known what was happening in Tuvalu, I don't know how to say it, if I didn't read Davy's book. They have literally lost almost all of their coastline due to climate change. And I have never heard of that. I mean, I've never even heard of Tuvalu. So maybe we need to inform our students better.
Kind of going off of that, I know in Professor Hayes' class, I think it was last week, they watched a video of students from China that were speaking about how climate change hasn't impacted them. And they were talking about the different typhoons that hit their country and how some of them lost their homes, lost family members. And it just kind of like, brought a real perspective to that and like open your eyes to like this is currently taking place. But if we were to bring this issue back home, I mean, I'm not sure how many of you heard of this, but New York is sinking. Like it's like in the next 50 years or so, they say Manhattan's going to be underwater. And if you've seen any videos, there's actually been some subways that are currently flooded and have shut down because of, the heavy rainfall and hurricanes that would typically hit the New York area. So, like you said, just having like raw new coverage can do a lot.
Other questions? Oh, yes.
First of all, congratulations and thank you for all that you did tonight and for all those behind me that also came here. I guess in a way, I'm being a little selfish because I came here because I wanted to hear what you had to say, what the young people had to say. I was given a job by our community and we're Franciscan, so what you're doing is very Franciscan with creation. But we had a chapter, and at the chapter, they came up with these different statements and declarations. And I got the job with a group of sisters to implement them. I've got to put them into practice. The first two were care of the earth and care of the poor, because the two go together. Most of the people that are hurt right now because of climate change are those that are poor. So I'm saying, why am I going to recreate the wheel? Pope Francis already did this. He wrote a book, an encyclical, Laudato Si. You might have heard of it. And there was a documentary that was put out called The Letter. And I would be very happy if you could get a group together to show the video of The Letter in our conference center. And I said, well, how am I going to get all these sisters? Do you know there are 92 Bernardines, Franciscan sisters in Reading? So I figured what I'd do was I'd give them all a letter from the Holy Father. So I went and I couldn't buy in the post office airmail letters. They don't make them anymore. But I did get them from Amazon and I made little stamps. Don't worry, I did not send them through the real mail. And I addressed it to every sister and I did his letter, but I copied the parts of the first chapter of Laudato Si of what's happening with climate change, what's happening to the poor, and encouraging the sisters, to come. And believe it or not, before the deadline, I had 100% of the sisters respond. So that's what happens when you get a letter from the Pope Francis. So anyway, what we're doing is we're trying to do the same thing that you're doing. And I'm wondering if there's anything that we as Bernardine Franciscan sisters could do to help you. And my real question is, where are you going from here? You started something. Do you have any plans of where you're going to take it from here?
So I can touch on where we're going to take it from here. So as a social worker, we do have to do a social work conference in the spring. And climate change is one of our topics that we are deciding to choose. It's that, and then also gun violence. So we're in between those two of what doing for the social work conference in the spring. So I foresee that we're probably going to choose climate change because we work mostly with the marginalized and those who are poor for social workers. So I do think that we're going to have a lot of people wanting to talk about that and also open up to the public for those who want to talk about it. Is where I see as a social worker where I'm going to implement that.
I think as you as Bernardine Franciscan sisters are in a leadership position, and you as sisters need to just keep leading. And because you have such a calling for being sisters and having that faith, I think you as Bernardine Franciscan sisters can just lead. Keep doing what you're doing to reuse your water bottles or do your simple habits that make that difference to be able to educate others and be that leader. I think is really a big thing that not only you as Bernardine Franciscan sisters to do, but all of us here on the panel, all of you guys out here in the audience can do is be a leader about climate change. Be that difference.
Add on to what Bailey said, I think also building connections within the communities. I'm pretty sure you guys already have connections, but one thing I've learned about this area is that everybody on campus knows somebody in this community. So building those bridges to help, spread the word about climate change and to share ways that you were implementing the small habits into your day-to-day lifestyle, I think that could be also helpful to other people in this community or even the state of Pennsylvania itself. On campus, I think personally, the communications club, which I'm one of the officers for, I think we could host some type of event, maybe around Earth Day or something, and possibly collaborate with other clubs that are interested. But I think having some type of involvement activity for the students to be a part of could be a good way to start as well.
I always take a group of students to the Reading Earth Day Festival to volunteer. So if you're ever interested in that, we do it every single spring. Let me know. I'll take you. We'll get on the shuttle. It's one of my favorite things to do. All right, Teddy.
Sorry, to tack onto that, Holland Center does have an Earth Day service project that they do every year. So that's an opportunity to get service hours and do help out with the Earth.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask, why do you guys think that political figures should worry about climate change if they can worry about other significant issues that can potentially bring in more voters?
I think it's something we should focus on because it's more than just a political thing. It's our day-to-day life and it will affect us day to day. I think climate change is bigger than politics, and I feel that the politics behind climate change are very not, I'd say unjust, because they all say they're going to do something and they never really do. They're like, oh, we're gonna do this, this, and that, and then maybe they do one of those 3, 5, 7 things, and then we never hold them once again accountable. So then we just keep electing these people, dare I say it, these white old men who aren't making a change and are just using what they think we want to hear against us rather than actually sticking to their word.
Add on to that by saying that politics has recently become more of like a popularity contest and actually caring for the people. And I think because you are dealing with a generation who is so socially aware of what's taking place, you don't have the right people representing you. So therefore, people tend not to vote or even care about what's taking place because they know it's not going to matter in the end. So I think, like going back to the beginning where we were talking about, voting and making a difference, that's where it starts with us. We get the right people in office, we can go ahead and start having these things, like these changes implemented and seen in our communities. Yeah.
Thank you very much, girls. It was a great presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you. One thing I wanted to mention is I was very much taken with, over the past year, I guess, I began watching the news because I had a little more time, the evening news. And we watched Channel 6, David Muir, best watched newscaster ever. But I noticed that whenever he was presenting something about some disaster with climate, at the end of the presentation or after they showed some film clips, he'd come back to the same statement. And this is all due, we understand this is all due to climate change. And the first time I heard him say it, I thought, well, that's great, and then the next time and the next, and I'm hearing it from him, one person. I don't know about the other newscasters because I don't go to other channels, but I'm hearing it from him frequently. And I'm thinking, one person who's reaching millions of people who are watching the show, is it going to wake them up? Is it going to help them realize, wait a minute, I've not been paying attention. I've just been busy, cutting up my carrots or putting the kids to bed or something. And I think that's, it calls for a kind of concerted effort on the part of everyone to start singing the same song. And hopefully as the lyrics sink down and as we begin to recognize the disasters in this world, we can stop or we can halt some of it that's happening. We can save parts of the countries that are really devastated and dying. We can preserve the future for the children that will come after us. And I want to congratulate all of the students who are doing a wonderful job just tonight with this presentation. Thank you.
I see one last question. Dr. Shaw, right? I'm coming. I saw your hand. I think this will be our last question.
Yeah, perhaps I'm a little more cynical, and I hope it doesn't come off like this, but I think we've seen it's very easy when you're young and idealistic to believe in the future. We saw that in the 1960s with a lot of love and community, and these are the same people that in the 1980s prioritized profit over helping others. We see it time and time again. So when your generation gets older and they have a business, are they going to make the decisions? It's much easier now to say this, but when you have to cut jobs or sacrifice things for your family for the greater good, are you willing to do it? Are you willing to pay for a car that's twice as expensive because it's better for the environment? So what makes your generation different? That they won't be corrupted when you have, now you don't have a lot of skin in the game. You don't have a lot to lose, but when you're older and you have to put your career on the line or your money on the line, why are this generation going to be different from previous generations who were ultimately corrupted by greed or money?
It's a tough question, but it is a good question. So panelists, what do you think?
I don't know if we will be different, but the one way I think we could be different is by changing laws, um, holding each other accountable. Like like I said, political figures are always saying this stuff and they never do it. Um, I'm gonna say something, I'm gonna keep my word. And I feel like if we all started doing that, which is like I said, I'm Watts cynic. So I get where you're coming and I see that point of view fully. Oh, no, I'm not either. No, but
How do you prevent the generation
I-
from making that? Because you have to make that hard decision.
yeah.
But when you actually have to sacrifice something, it's easy to say now, and we all want it, but what is different about your generation that's going to put their money where the mouth?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know what's different.
Okay.
But I just feel that we are.
Okay.
I'm gonna say. Okay. I'm gonna say the drive, and I know other generations in the past they had drive too, but I think what separates us is that we can use social media to our benefit. I mean, we talked about how these extremists are using it for profit, but if you think about it, whatever's trending, we're gonna do that. I mean, Gen Z, we just kind of have that effect. But I think also because we have this early on awareness, and a lot of us that are like around our age, we're already starting to take action by stepping into political roles and becoming role models. Like what's her name, Greta Thunberg. I mean, she was very popular. I'm not sure where she is now, but she was very popular early on when she first started talking about climate change. So I think if we keep motivating one another and inspiring one another and using social media to our advantage, I think that could be the difference maker.
And I appreciate what you said, Sharon. Like, having social media is our culture, and having that difference of culture, I think, is what's going to maybe impact where we put our money where our mouth is. But you can never give a definite answer. But I definitely think us having that awareness now and instilling it in the next generation, will definitely impact in the long run.
I feel like a boomer now. I just want to thank you because it is courageous to get up and in front of your peers and talk about such a difficult issue. I mean, some of our politicians actually avoid this, right? So I think it is really wonderful, and it is a first step. I think it came up in some of the conversation, the value of education, right? And part of education is talking about issues. It's about disagreeing, right? And having civil dialogue. But I also want you to dig into a phrase that we use here a lot, because I think it actually can help you to think about some of the solutions, right? And Dr. Schultz brought this up, like, how do we have enough empathy, right? How do we have enough, one might say, radical love, as we talked about in previous years as our common read? So I want you to think as you leave, I guess I'm just as a kind of a exit, is what do we mean when we say knowledge joined with love, right? What is our educational values at Alvernia? What are the core values? But what is this idea? What does that phrase really mean if it's empty in some way, right? So is it love for the universe? Is it love for the people who live in Tavulu? Is it only our immediate families or our own worlds? Really, what does love mean? And how do we combine it with what you're getting here as an education to make a difference? And I want to say one last thing, and this is not a criticism. I know Allie really well. She was in my search class her freshman year. But you made a statement. You said, well, we've always had bottled water. Well, when I was a kid, we didn't have bottled water. We just got water from the tap. And we do have these refillable stations. And should we have all of this here? I'm not, as not a criticism, I'm glad that, and in my, budget help provide for all of this. But like, I guess I say that more as like, how do we innovate, right? How do we make the change? How do we convince people that we don't actually have to carry water bottles around, right? How do we communicate that? You are a generation that can solve some of these, I guess, disconnects, right? That we can sit here and talk about climate change and yet have a bunch of bottled water here ready for everybody, right? Why did we do that, right? So question that, keep doing that. So thank you so much. It's so refreshing to have a student panel, and I really am glad to see you talking about these issues, and I hope you'll continue outside of the classroom.
Any final panelist responses to any of those things? I mean, I think part of this really is a cost benefit sort of thing, right? So in many ways, paying the costs of fixing climate change in some cases are high. And as Dr. Schaub was saying, when we think about this, right, we also have to have our materialistic livelihoods taken care of and those types of things. But just frankly, the cost of those plastic water bottles is a couple dollars. And when you have a room full of people that you have to, have water to, you can't expect to provide plastic jugs for everybody, right? So it's tough. It really is a cost benefit analysis. And in political science, one of the things that we know is that, and this is just as an aside, I'm going to throw in some politics here, but we know that there's something called an issue attention cycle. And it was discovered or sort of proposed by this scholar, Anthony Downs. And what he said was, initially, when there's a problem, people get up in arms and they become energized and they're ready to solve it and they're engaged. But then they realize that to solve that problem, they have to pay costs. They have to change their behavior. They have to spend more money on things like electric cars or whatever we're talking about. And when it comes to that, we go through this issue attention cycle downswing where people don't want to pay the costs and it kind of fades out of the media attention and we keep going through these issues. And Downs originally came up with this to talk about ecology, like this environmental ecology. And I think we continually see this. We see ups and downs with ecology, which is the title of the article. So I think my answer to that question is there are costs to this. This is not costless. Our behavior is going to change, but we have to have incentive-based mechanisms to change it. So thank you all for coming. Give our panelists a huge round of applause. I am so appreciative to them for being willing to come here, and this is not easy, right, to speak in front of your colleagues like this. And thank you all for coming. It's a vital part of the search program to be engaged in events like this, and hopefully you can come to some more in the future. Have a good evening. Thank you. Thank you.